I'll be reading from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 25. And we'll be reading verses 31 to 40. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me." God add his blessing to the reading of his word. We are very privileged to have with us today Ray and Karen Howell from Minnesota. And Ray was our speaker last night at our annual game dinner outreach. Some of you were there. It was wonderful hearing his story. And so we're bringing him here this morning, and he's going to share with you. And Ray, coming up, we're so glad that you're here. There's a little bit of his bio, and Kicking Bear Ministries right here under the sermon notes. And you should Google it and find out more. It's very fascinating. It's so good to have you, Ray. It's all yours.
Well, good morning. It's a beautiful day out there today, and last night was awesome. For those of you that didn't have a chance to come, I mean, everybody was out there cooking and making things, and the smiles on their faces and the joy in their hearts. I mean, there was joy. I mean, as soon as I walked in, everybody was working hard, but they got this special smile, and it's a smile that just shows Jesus in their heart. And so we had a wonderful night last night. We really did. I mean, I was holding a whole pan of frog legs. It was awesome. So I had a chance to tell what went on in my life, and really what's put me behind the podium here today. And the pastor's asked me to share with you again what God's done in my life. At the age of 5 years old, I had the greatest mom and the most incredible dad in the world. And every day, my brothers and sisters and I stood at the window waiting for Dad to come home. And when he came home, he'd be coming down the street and pulling the driveway. We're all wound up. And as soon as he got to the door, we tackled him. And I'll tell you what, if you remember hanging on to your dad's legs and he's pulling you across the floor and throwing you up in the air and catching you and playing with you, Dad was absolutely fun. And at that time in our life, it was just pure joy. There was no stress with jobs or people or things that go on in life. Everything that went on at home was fun as a kid. So every day we got to have Mom, but there was something special about Dad coming home. And on weekends when he didn't have to work, we got to goof around with him. He took us out, and we went four-wheeling with him one time in this old truck he had, bouncing and banging around, and we're out in the middle of the woods, and he got that truck stuck. And, I mean, we were stuck. And as a little kid, you know, you think, oh, we ain't going to get back home. We're out in the middle of nowhere. But, you know, my dad became our hero. He got us home to Mom, and everything was awesome. So, you know, as days went by, we were having a lot of fun. Everything we did with Dad and Mom was great. And one day I came around the corner in the house, and I saw my dad talking to my mom, and I heard him say very clearly, "I'm leaving." And my dad had a different voice. He wasn't violent or anything like that. He just had a different voice to him. And when he said that, it went right to my heart. I knew what he was saying was true. And there's no way my dad's leaving without me. And I went out the front door and hid in the back seat of his car. And I went up as far as you could get up in the back seat. And I was hiding there. And it wasn't very long. That back door opened up and they said, "Here he is." And As soon as they started grabbing me, I was grabbing onto the seat and hanging on and screaming, "Dad, don't go, don't go, don't go without me." And they pulled me out on the ground, and my dad had a whole different attitude. He just was not the fun guy. He was serious and didn't seem like he cared about me, didn't care about anything that was going on. And he gets in the car and drives out the driveway and down the road and just keeps going. And I tell you what, life took a whole different turn. It went from joy to like a dark cloud coming over. My mom was not the same mom either. She was depressed and down and confused. And the worst part about it with us kids was standing at the window every day waiting for Dad to come home, and he never showed up again. Every day. So life was totally different. And as we were going forward, one day I was in the house and I heard somebody knocking at the door, and I opened up the door, and here's this big tall guy standing there with a little lady, and he looks at me and points at me and says, "You're Raymond." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, I'm your grandpa." And this guy has got a whole different look to him. Big smile on his face, and he's happy, and comes in, and just everything started to change again. All of a sudden, you're kind of taken out of the darkness that you're in. And he says, "We're going to take you kids and your mom, we're going to move you back to our home, and we're all going to be one family." And no kidding, my grandpa moved us from Detroit, Michigan to La Crosse, Wisconsin. And my grandpa became my dad. He became my best friend and somebody who I was really, really loved him. I mean, he was awesome. We got to do things with him. He took me, especially me on weekends, and took me on, introduced me to his friends, and we went and had coffee and donuts, and just, I remember the peanut donut rolls he used to give me. I mean, that was his favorite donut. I mean, I had an awesome time with my grandpa. He bought us our first bicycles. And I got to go fishing, and I went to school. Everything was normal, and we were happy. Well, about the age of 12 years old, I knew my grandpa was sick, but my mom and my grandma sat us down and told us just how sick he was. They said he had a thing called crawling stomach cancer. Well, to me, it was like Grandpa had the flu and he's going to get better. But it wasn't. He was sick, and he was really down all the time. And he was different, and he kept losing weight. He went from a big man, smaller and smaller, and then wasn't very long. He was in bed all the time. So they said, "Well, we're going to take him to the hospital." Well, to me, going to the hospital, you're going to get fixed up and come back. You know, they're going to fix you. And he was in the hospital and just kept getting worse. And I remember going to the hospital one day after school to see him, and they wouldn't let me in the room because he had passed away. So twice in my life, I had a man that I loved very much, and it wasn't my fault, and they were gone. And there again, this home that was fun and joyful, now there's another dark cloud over it. My mom and my grandma became confused. They weren't focused on the kids because there was money and there was bills and there was all kinds of things going on. So going forward, for myself, going to school, it got kind of tough on me. I'd go to school, and the kids at school didn't treat me the same. It was like I wasn't good at sports. I went out for wrestling, I went out for basketball, and every time I goofed up, you got teased or you got picked on, and it wasn't a good situation. And I remember going to school a few times and had bullies picking on me. And if any of you have ever been bullied when you were a kid, it wasn't good. I got the ever-living daylights beat out of me when I was a kid a couple times. And I didn't have a dad or a big brother or my grandpa to put their hand on my shoulder and say, "Hey, stay away from my kid. Leave him alone." I was on my own. So what ended up happening is I started hanging around with other kids that had the same problems as I did. And they, I started hanging around with them really to kind of stick together so you kind of protect yourselves from bullies and people that were picking on you. And the next thing you know, those kids that were the groups that you see on the street corner smoking cigarettes and stuff, that was some of the groups I was with. At night, they'd be drinking and partying and chasing girls and doing things. Well, after a little while, I started doing the same thing they did. I was partying and having a good time, and school was really secondary. Now, I didn't have to listen to my mom or my grandma because I'm a tough kid. If I didn't want to listen to them, I didn't have a man to grab a hold of me and say, "Hey, straighten your act out." So all these things that were on the streets were handed to me. I could do whatever I wanted to do. And if I didn't want to go home, I didn't go home. If I didn't want to go to school, I didn't go to school. And this went on, and you know, going down that path at that time didn't seem so bad. It seemed like a kind of a fun life. But on the other hand, when I look back at it now, it was a path of total destruction. Some of those kids that were on that path never got off it, and they're not around right now. And you know, so everything's going pretty good. One day I went home to see my mom, and there was a strange man in the house, big tall guy, and he looks at me and he says, "Ray, sit down." And just like that, you know, this big intimidating guy has me sit down in a chair. I have no idea who this guy is. My brothers and sisters are there with my mom, and he says, "You kids are out of control. And being out of control, you're not listening to your mom or your grandma, so we got new homes for you." And just like that, my freedom was gone. I mean, they took my brothers and sisters and put in one car, and then they put me in another one. And evidently I was a little worse than my brothers and sisters or something, but they took me, and I went, the cars went just like this on the street. I went one way and they went the other, and they took me to a work farm up in Holman, Wisconsin. And I met my 5 other foster brothers that were there, and those boys were in some serious trouble. And they're the kind of kids you wouldn't want your kids hanging around with. And every morning we got up, we milked cows, we went to school smelling like a cow, and we came home and milked cows. That was my daily routine. And I'll tell you, I liked to work, but having people that didn't care about you, that didn't go over too good. And as I was going forward, it was like being in a jail with no walls, no bars or no barbed wire or anything. I mean, I was in there and I couldn't get out of it. And I hated it. I couldn't go for sports at school. I couldn't go fishing or hunting like the other kids were going. I hated listening to the stories at school because those kids got to do that stuff I didn't. I was milking cows and doing chores. So one day the school bus pulled up to the school. All the kids went into the school, and I went the other way. I ran away. I went back down by my friends, and I was hanging out on the beach and doing the things we were doing. Everything was back to normal. No more imprisonment. Well, about a week went by, and the police caught me. They picked me up, and for truancy for 3 days, they give you 3 days off of school. Well, that 3 days of mine was spent in jail. You imagine a 13-year-old kid, 14 at the most, being in jail? They took me and put me in jail for 3 days. As soon as the 3 days were up, the probation officer would come and get me and take me back to the foster home. Well, I want to tell you something. I absolutely hated it. I hated my life. The farther it went, the worse it got. And being a kid, you know, those things that are going on were forever. You didn't have no future thinking this is going to get over with. This is the way it's going, and it kept getting worse. So every time I had a chance to, I ran away from that home. I'd run away and go back down with my friends. And it seemed like I'd always get caught. Well, at least I got some freedom and some time away from working the chores. Well, the one time I ran away, which was the 5th time, my mom was there. I loved her very much, and I went up and saw her and gave her a hug, and you know something, I wasn't there 5 minutes. And the police came and picked me up, and they put me in a squad car, and I'm thinking, how did I get caught so quick? I'm in the squad car, and I'm going back to jail, and I'm thinking to myself, gosh, did my mom call the police? She had to call the police. And at that time was the lowest of lows in my life, because I realized I had nobody. Nobody wanted me. I was totally rejected by everybody. And I'm going back to a work farm again. And I remember being put in jail that night, and I'm going to tell you something. I didn't care if I lived or died anymore. It was that bad. I didn't want to live this way. I was in jail, and so upset. And I remember kneeling down on a concrete floor up against a steel bed, and I prayed to a God I didn't know. I said, God, would you please put somebody in my life that no matter what would happen would never leave me? And you know something? At that point, it was wishful thinking to me, because all I could think about what was going to go on now, 3 days from now, that parole officer is going to walk through that door, and he's going to say the words that I want to hear. Come on, I got to take you back home. So for 3 days, I sat in that jail figuring out what I'm going to do, and I was not going back to the foster home. If you've ever been to the end of what you want to be at, that's where I was at. I was not going back no matter what. Life or death, it didn't matter to me. So for 3 days, I'm in there thinking about what am I going to do. And I came up with a plan that when the parole officer picked me up and got me in his car, the first stop sign we got to, I'm going to stop at in that car. I'm going to jump out the car and take off running. And I was not going to go back by my friends on the beaches and the places where I was, because I was not going to get caught again. I was not going to live this life no more. And I didn't care. I really didn't care. I was going to the big cities, and nobody knows me, and I'm not going to live this life. And so the third day, and I always talked about, when you're in jail, they got the worst tasting coffee and the worst cornflakes in the world. I will never forget that. And I got up that morning, I had my coffee and my cornflakes, and I went out on the steel bench where they had, and there was magazines on that bench, and there was a magazine that I hadn't seen before. And I opened it up, and I looked at it, and there was pictures of moose and bears and deer and stories of people going to Alaska and Canada and hunting. You know, in this total depression that I was in, and looking at this magazine, all of a sudden I'm taken out of this depression, and for a few minutes I'm in a lot better place than I was. And just then that door opens up, and I looked over to the side, and there he's standing there. Come on, Ray, I got to take you back home. Just the exact words I wanted to hear. I went right back into that dark spot again. And you might imagine I'm walking to that car, to get in that car, and all I could think about was running away. And what a low point. And I get into the car, we're driving down the road, and I am looking for that stop sign. I am ready to run. I'm not backing off on what my plans were. And this man that picked me up, he says to me, he says, Ray, I seen you read the hunting magazine. He said, would you like to go hunting? And for whatever reason, I'm a tough kid. I ain't supposed to be talking to a probation officer or a guy from the sheriff's department. I looked at him and said, yeah. And he said to me, he says, Ray, you promise me that you don't run away from that home. I'm going to find you a better place to live. And in the meantime, I'm going to take you hunting with me and my sons. And, you know, I looked at him, and I made that promise to him. And he took me back to the foster home, same routine. But now I had a dream in my heart that maybe this guy is going to really take me hunting and help me find a better home. Well, I went back to milking cows and smelling like a cow and going to school and doing the same routine. And my foster mother walked up to me one day and said, Ray, Tom called and he wants to come pick you up on Friday and take you hunting with him and his sons. And I want to tell you something. You want to talk about being uplifted. You could have just heard me scream. It was awesome. I get to go. And no kidding, he come on Friday and picked me up with his boys, and we went out to a cabin out in the middle of nowhere. And I'm telling you what, they treated me like I was family. I mean, it was really cool. And, you know, we got there and we were shooting bows and arrows, and we had a bonfire and telling stories. And I mean, I'm totally pulled out of the garbage that I was in. I'm having the best time of my life. And you know that the next morning we're going to get up at 4:30 in the morning. And you know how excited I was? I didn't even go to sleep that night. I was up with my hunting clothes on, ready to roll. I mean, this is it. I mean, this is really something. Next morning, I remember the alarm clock going off, and Tom's door opens up and slams against the wall, and he runs out the door, and come on, this is tradition. And the kids run out, his sons run out the door behind him, and yeah, come on, Ray, you got to come. And you know what they did? They ran right out the back door and jumped off the dock and jumped into the water out there. And they're in the water. It's dark outside. It's freezing cold out. And they're yelling, come on, Ray, jump in with us. This is a tradition. You guys are nuts. This is freezing cold. I ain't jumping in that water. Well, next thing you know, I jumped in there, and I'll tell you something. At that point, I was part of that family. And I'll tell you, what a weekend. I saw my first white-tailed deer. I got buck fever so bad, I couldn't even think about shooting a deer. I was hooked, and I was hooked forever. But on the way home, I'm going back to the foster home, and Tom says to me, he says, Ray, I want you to know you're going to turn 18 years old soon. And when you turn 18, you get to have your own family. You can have your own job and make your own money, and you can go hunting. You're an American. You're free. This is what you can do. And I'm going to tell you something. I had somebody I trusted now, somebody I could talk to. I only went hunting with Tom 4 times during my high school career, but he got me through it, got me into a better home, did everything he said he was going to do. At the age of 18 years old, I'll tell you what, this is really something. At the age of 18 years old, I got married 1 month after I turned 18. I was in love, and I was working 2 jobs and going to school. I was living the dream. I got to go hunting. And at the age of 19 years old, God blessed me with a little baby girl, just a little baby. And I named her Danielle. I got to be a dad. And I remember holding her and looking at her. And I remember saying to myself, I'm going to give her everything I didn't have, but most of all, I'm going to give her her dad. And I'll tell you what, I worked hard. I worked hard to put food on the table. And, and what ended up happening going forward, that year, in the wintertime, I harvested my first deer with a bow. And I'll tell you, I was so proud of that deer. I put it on the back of my car, and I drove around for a week with a deer on the back of my car. I'm living a dream. This is happening. Well, things are going forward, and by the time I'm 23 years old, I've now got 5 children. I didn't know what was happening. They're popping out left and right. And it was hard to make ends meet. I mean, there was bills, there was hospital bills, there was all kinds of things coming up, but I was their dad, and I had to make a decision. And because of my grandpa being such a big influence in my life, my grandpa had owned his own business at one time. I thought, boy, my grandpa was in business for himself. He did it, I can do it. And I quit a perfectly good job and went into business for myself. And I want you to know that was a bold move, but because of my grandpa's influence, I could do it. And it was the fear of failure that made me succeed. I was so afraid I wasn't going to put food on the table for my kids. I worked hard. There was no 40 hours a week. It was whatever it took. And you know, as the business started to grow, I'll tell you, Tom Polke showed up at my shop one day. And the guy that changed my life shows up at my shop. And he says, Ray, we got a kid by the name of Brian. He's in a lot of trouble. Unless I can get him some help, he's going to go to St. Mike's. And as soon as he said St. Mike's to me, it hit me pretty hard. I didn't even get to know my brother Dan. My brother Dan, when we went in different cars, he got took to a place called St. Mike's, which was a boys' home. Now, I thought I had it bad, but my brother really had it bad. And he went down a path that even today is not come out of. So when he said that to me, I said, gosh, let me think about it. I went home that night, and I thought, the man that changed my life thinks I can mentor another kid. The next day I called him. I said, could you bring Brian over? And he brings Brian over. Here's this little short kid. I looked at him and said, how could that kid be in that kind of trouble? This kid was in trouble. I'm telling you, he was in trouble. And I sat down with him, talked to him, find out he's a pretty nice kid. And I said, well, if you want to come to work after school and clean up around the shop and maybe do a little hunting and fishing on the weekends with us, you'd be more than welcome. You know something? Brian was with me for 6 years. I saw how that boy's life got changed just like mine. After Brian left, I went back to Tom and said, Tom, I need another kid. And he got me another kid. And I tell you, I went through 7 other kids in a row. And I found that some of them you could lead them to water, but you couldn't make them drink. But the kids that wanted their lives changed, wanted it different. Boy, I'll tell you what a difference it is to have a man in their life. And so things are going pretty good. And the business is growing, and I started chasing my dreams of the all over the world with a bow in my hand. And in the sport of weightlifting, powerlifting, I got into drug-free powerlifting and into raw tournaments. And because I got beat up by bullies when I was a kid, I didn't want to get beat up no more. And I think that was the biggest thing that pushed me into trying to get to a size where nobody would pick on me. Well, I started going to tournaments once in a while, and after about 5 years, you'd win first place once in a while. And after 10 years, I was winning quite often. And I want you to know, I found out the only person that you really compete about in life is yourself. And after 15 to 20 years of it, you're setting records. And I remember getting a letter from the United States Powerlifting Association asking me to compete at the Worlds for the United States at the 242-pound class. What an incredible letter. I showed it to my wife and said, Karen, I can't believe this. I trained for it, and I'll tell you, it's a 5-day tournament, and at the end of the tournament, I didn't know for sure if I'd won it because everything was in kilos instead of pounds. There was so much confusion with interpreters and everything else. But at the end of the 5-day tournament, when they called up the 242-pound class and went from 5th place to 1st place, I told Karen, I said, if that Russian person there gets 2nd place, I know I got 1st. That's the guy I felt I was competing against. And no kidding, they called him up for 2nd place, and I knew I'd won it. What an incredible, everything that Tom told me had come true. I got to chase my dreams. I got to have my own family and my own job. Everything he told me come true. And I mean, everything I was doing, the more I focused on business and more I focused on hunting and the more I focused on the weightlifting, I kept succeeding in the things I was doing. And no matter what I did, I tried to do it better the next time. And there was joy in winning, but it just seemed like it wasn't a very long, satisfying joy. I kept going after it over and over again. And one day, my wife, Karen, walks up to me and she said, "Ray, I came into your life to help save you." I just about snapped. I said, "How are you going to save me? You got a house? You got cars? You got food on the table? You got everything I've given you, I provided for you and the family. How are you going to save me?" And, you know, I knew something about Karen that really kind of bothered me at the time. I was number 2 in her life. She loved the Lord more than she loved me. You know, as a kid, you know, going to church, my grandpa used to drive us to church, drop us off, and then pick us up after church. That was the manly thing to do. Well, I'd go to church and sit next to Karen just to listen to her sing because she's got a voice like an angel and she's my wife. And, well, I really didn't think too much of the God thing or Jesus thing. I just was there and was part of it. Well, in chasing my dreams, there was a group of about 5 men that I worked with and talked to them so I wouldn't get into a bad hunt. And in that group, there was a man by the name of Pat Quinn. And we were at an event in Texas, and there was hundreds of people around, just like last night. There was hundreds of people around. And my wife and Pat Quinn were talking and talking and talking. And I want to tell you something in the earthly thoughts. I started getting a little swolled up. I started turning green because this guy looked like a movie star. If you saw Pat, you'd look at him and say, "Yep, that guy's a movie star. He's fallen in love with my wife." And I didn't like it. I started turning green. And this went on. It kept going on and on. 45 minutes or so, and they're over there talking yet. And that's it. I had it. I about snapped. I walked right up to both of them, looked them in the face. I said, "What's going on here?" And they both turned and looked at me at the same time and said, "We're talking about your salvation." I want you to know, when they said that, I about shook my head and walked away. This is the craziest thing I ever heard. I knew how to grab Pat by the collar and stay away from my wife. I didn't know how to handle what was just said to me. And I walked away. And about, 3 days later, Pat Quinn did something that was so bold that today still stands out to me. He called me on the phone. And he says to me, "Ray, I want to tell you something. You can have your own personal relationship with Jesus Christ. That is something that I've never heard before." And he talked to me for about another half hour. Everything went in one ear and out the other, but I did hear that. And going forward, I was still chasing my dreams, and my idols were setting records in powerlifting and harvesting animals and making a lot of money. This is what I was focused on. This is all that mattered to me. And going forward, I went to church with Karen one morning, and guess what day it was? It was Father's Day. And I remember this day sitting there in church thinking about my dad. I started thinking about myself, thinking about the children that I got and all the things that have gone on. And man, I have my own business, I have my own family, and I really want to change things. I'm happy now. And I started thinking about my dad, and I started thinking, gosh, it took 2. It was my dad and my mom. I wanted you to know I absolutely hated my dad. Some other kids got to have him for a dad. We didn't get to see him no more. And there was a hatred in me that was bad. And if I would have seen him on the streets, it probably wouldn't have been good. But that day, I sat there and I forgave my dad for everything he did to me and my brothers and sisters. And I want you to know there was so much weight on my shoulder of hatred, I didn't even know how much hatred I had. But it was lifted off of me. And as it was lifted off of me, I uncontrollably, a grown man sitting in church crying. And I was sitting next to my wife, and Karen says to me, "What's the matter?" I said, "I forgave my dad today." I walked out of that church a different man. I knew forgiveness. And going forward, I was asked by a lot of companies to be on their pro staff. I was asked by them to be an ambassador to their company. I was always testing equipment for them and doing different things, a lot of stuff with TV and magazines and videos. And one of the things was Gander Mountain asked me to, instead of cutting a ribbon with a scissors, they would ask me to cut it with an arrow. And I want you to know something. Stand in front of a crowd of 300 to 600 people with a bow in your hand, you got one shot at a ribbon this wide, a little high or a little low. You find out what kind of man you are when you got to grab that second arrow. And I'll tell you what, I did not want to be that guy grabbing the second arrow. They heckle you and they give you such a hard time. It's so hard to focus on the second shot because people teasing you. So I didn't want to be in that position. So I practiced quite a bit. I had a ribbon cutting coming up the following weekend. And the ribbon cutting is probably about as long as this room here, probably about 21 yards or so. And it's a real deal. Shooting with a 2-blade broadhead and shooting the same equipment that I use for hunting. Well, I thought if I could do what I do when I practice for hunting, shoot at long range to make me a good short range shooter, I'd have my confidence when I went to stand in front of the crowd. So this particular day I put 5 ribbons on the target. And why 5, I don't know. We were talking about it. I don't know why I put 5 on there. I put 5 on there, and I decided to go back to 100 yards, and I'm going to shoot at them ribbons and see if I can cut them. If I can cut a ribbon at 100 yards, 21 yards is a walk in the park. I'll have all the confidence in the world. So I'll go back, and the ribbon is a real bright pink color, and they're only about that wide. And I go back, and I'm looking at it. All 5 ribbons are on the target. I draw my bow back. I take my 100-yard pin and touch the bottom of the top ribbon, and I let go. And in the blink of an eye, that ribbon was cut. Most amazing thing I ever saw. I mean, this is incredible. I cut the first ribbon. And then I pulled the second arrow, and I cut the second ribbon, then the third one, then the fourth one, and the fifth one. I couldn't miss. This is unbelievable. I'm looking at this, and all 5 ribbons are cut. And I'm thinking to myself, this is the dumbest thing you ever did. You didn't have somebody with a video camera behind it, because nobody will ever believe what you did, because it's humanly impossible to do what was just done. I'm just at awe. I mean, I'm having the best day of my life. Okay, next week I'm going to be 21 yards from that target. This is a walk in the park. I don't care how many people around me. I'm going to cut that ribbon. And I walk up to the target, and I'm looking at that, and no kidding, the ribbons are laying to the side. All 5 arrows are in a line just like that. One run right above the other one. Wow, this is awesome. And I'm thinking to myself, this is humanly impossible to do. God had to be guiding these arrows. And I started thinking about this, and I started thinking about what Pat Quinn said to me about having my own personal relationship with Jesus Christ and all these things that had gone on in my life. And I was pulling the arrows out, and as I got to the last arrow, I remember pulling that last arrow out, and that was the one. I thought, this is humanly impossible to do. God is guiding these arrows, but not only these arrows today, but ever since I was 5 years old, God has been guiding me. All the things that had happened in my life happened for a purpose, and that purpose wasn't just for Ray Howell. And I'm thinking, man, what am I thinking about here? All of a sudden, my head's in a different spot. No, I'm gonna shoot again. So I put 5 more ribbons on a target. I'm having the best day of my life. I'm gonna cut them ribbons again, and so I get it all set up, and I turn around and start walking back, bow in one hand, and the others, and I'm thinking about this, thinking about it. God is real. This has really happened. And I want to tell you something. I got about halfway back, and it was like somebody hit me in the back with a club, and I went to my knees. And I raised my hands up, bow in one hand, the other, arrows in the other, and I said, from now on, Lord, this is no longer to my glory, it's to yours. And I gave my heart to the Lord. I asked God to forgive me for my sins, and I asked Him to continue to guide me, and I asked Him, what do I do next? And you know something, just like that, I had more wisdom come in my head than I've ever had. I had the Spirit of the Lord enter me, and He told me, you've only got this much time left on this earth. You don't have time for other distractions. You don't have time for those other things you were doing. My business, my hunting, and my weightlifting, those were all idols. Those were all things that I was focused on. I didn't have time for them. And, you know, it was so clear to me, because my trophy room is much bigger than this room, and every wall on it is completely filled with critters that I chased with a bow. And I knew that the day I died, that those animals were going to sit on somebody else's wall, and my name wasn't even going to be on them. What did I complete there? Nothing. All the money that I had in the bank, this is pretty eye-opening. You know, there was money and there was fame, so I had a lot of friends. I had people that were hanging around me. People were fighting over that money. I wasn't even dead yet. I didn't even know who my friends were. And, you know, I can't take it with me, so what did I accomplish there? Nothing. And in the sport of powerlifting, I wanted to be the strongest man in the world. I wanted to set records that nobody could break. Well, I want you to know at this time, right now, today, my name is not at the top of those record books because they have been broken by somebody else. And what did I complete there? Nothing. Nothing but for myself and memories. So I knew what I had to do. I walked up to probably the most toughest thing I ever did. I had to tell my wife. I had to tell her I wasn't going back to the business. I was telling her I had to change my life. And I did. I walked up to Karen. I said, Karen, I gave my life to the Lord today. I said, my life has changed. I'm not going to the business anymore like I did. I'm not going hunting like I did anymore. I'm not going to be setting records anymore. God's called me to a ministry. I know what it is. I'm going to help every kid that's on the streets and let them know no matter what their problems are in life that God's got a purpose for them and it's not the garbage on the streets. You know what my wife said to me? Here's a man that could have lost his mind. Could be out of his head. She looks at me and she knew the truth. She says, Ray, you do what you think is best and I'm sticking with you. And I want to tell you something. The storms that come in after that, the things that went on, I didn't realize it, but I had a warrior bride. I had somebody that stood next to me no matter what went on, and then what she said to me came so true. Matter of fact, I want to bring Karen up here. Can I bring you up here, sweetheart? Come on. This is my wife, Karen, and this is a gift that God gave me. And the truth of it is, when I was 13, 14 years old, kneeling down on that concrete floor up against that steel bed, praying to a God I didn't know at the time, please put somebody in my life, no matter what goes on, would never leave me. I had no idea the blessing that he had planned for me. He has repaid me back 1,000 times over for what the enemy did to my family and to me in my life. He gave me this gift right here. This is right here. I talk about this all the time. This isn't a wedding ring. This is a symbol of a gift that God gave me. He gave me a warrior bride that no matter what goes on stands alongside me to help me fight the battle. You know what that's like? And you know, the day I gave my heart to the Lord, I sat down with my wife and we started reading the scriptures together. And within 3 months, my life really changed. And what was interesting about it was I loved Karen, but this joy that I had lost since I was 5 years old had started coming back into my life. I look at my wife, and I look into her eyes and the beauty that she has. She's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. I mean, God's protected my eyes. He's protected my marriage. He's taught me so many things about marriage and family. And as things have gone forward, he told me, he said, Ray, you don't know if you got tomorrow. You don't know if you got next week or not. The most important thing you can do is be the spiritual leader in your family and make sure that your children, your grandchildren, have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Because the minute they walk out that door, you can't protect them. And you know, that's been a focus not only with our children, but with every kid we get involved with and everybody. God gave me a job to be a disciple, to make disciples. That's our job. That's the only thing that we have to do. He's promised us he'll take care of us like the birds and the flowers in the field, and he's done that. So now we're called to a ministry called Kicking Bear. And what does it do? We put on camps all over the United States where all everybody gets to come for free, and we tear it up and have the best time of your life. Kids don't have time to be on cell phone to play games. We tear it up. And we share the gospel with them, and we let them know that no matter what their troubles are, that God's got a purpose for them. So in leaving you here this morning, as a man, I want you to know the toughest thing I've had to compete against is myself, being a man. I've had to step back and let God guide me. If I step into it, I mess it up. God's got a purpose for all of us, and the best thing we can do is be in Bible studies with our wives to protect our families. That was the only thing my mom and dad did wrong. They weren't in study together, so the kids were poured out on the streets. And if anybody here thinks that going to a Bible study is a little mousy or a little fruity, I used to think that. I want you to know that the toughest men I know, bar none, the toughest men I know love the Lord. They follow Christ. And for that, You got men that really have your back, not for your fame or your money. They have it because of the love of the Lord. So I want to tell you thank you for last night. Thank you for this morning, and what a blessing it is to be here. So thank you.